All right, welcome back, everybody. This is the Junto, and I'm Noah Sawyer. This is episode 45, and it's going to be a quick one. Hang on, I feel like, sorry, there's always something a little weird. Anyway, yeah, this will be just a quick episode. I was taking a shower, preparing to go to bed. I wasn't going to do an episode, and then I was like, I might as well just share something because at the end of the day, a lot of the premise of this show is just that we live in an extremely difficult societal situation to be well or righteous within, and it is always taking us away from the positivity of life and is numbing us and dulling us and letting us be, increasingly weakened, increasingly malleable, moldable to just support the economic system, the power structure, and we're being turned into weak people at every turn of our day. And so the premise of the show, if nothing else, is just to come on and share something that I'm thinking about that is something you might otherwise not encounter that day. It's not always positive. It might be a way of looking at something negative, but ultimately I'm a hopeful person, and I think this is generally a positive show. And, I've had people say when I was doing lectures in person, like after I gave a lecture one time, which this was just like private stuff I was doing in my apartment, they were like, I didn't want to come to this because I thought it was going to be really depressing, but I'm glad I came because ultimately it was optimistic. As serious as the subject matter is and as dire as our circumstances really are, it feels good to talk about it, because when you are just repressing it and creating a falsified worldview that is interpreting the world in terms of artifice, that feels bad. It makes us feel bad. We get detached from the truth, which would otherwise could heal us, otherwise could ground us in reality and prepare us to face the difficulties that we're going to face in this life. Instead, we are typically furnished with things that are not actually going to help us weather the storm, just coping mechanisms and addictions and falsehoods and distractions, really, that weaken us. And so I just wanted to come on because I found a book yesterday and I read it I didn't read the whole book last night, but I read some of it last night. And I was in the shower and I was just like, it's worth it just to share these couple paragraphs, if nothing else. So I'll be on for 20 minutes. I'll say a little bit more than just the paragraphs, but at the end of the day, if I just share these two things that meant something to me from this interview that starts off this book, then maybe that is going to create a better day for somebody else. So for a little bit of context today, I planted a garden for the first time with two of my friends, and it was a pretty large garden. We planted more than 60 plants, and it was a very wonderful experience. It was nice to just be in the dirt. It was nice to familiarize myself more with the plants, and just by being low for that long, like being on the ground for over an hour, once I stood up and walked and started to pat down the ground in certain areas to make it more level, I was like almost dizzy looking down at the plants because my perspective had gotten so used to being down there with them. And that just, I don't know, it was a nice experience. It was a nice change of pace to be doing that. And that sort of speaks to the feeling of disorientation that we encounter in the contemporary situation we're in the world, where we're adjusted to such a speed that we come to metabolize our senses. We come to metabolize the sense data out there, our perceptions. We come to deal with it in a certain way at a certain tempo that we get highly adjusted to. And that, I think that is a way in which a lot of wool is pulled over our eyes, because when you operate at that speed, you have less interiority, less awareness of what is transpiring around you, why it is transpiring around you. And oh my god, sorry, technical annoyance. So I forgot to oh shit, I forgot to focus the camera because this is just such a quick one. Well, I'll show you how I focus the camera. So I put this right here. Sorry if that was piercingly loud for any headphone users for like a second, but that's how it goes. So, all right. So yeah, I'll read this paragraph here or two. And I guess just to compare it, my friend who came to plant the garden with me, she came she drove 45 minutes and was in traffic. And that is such a, traffic doesn't make anyone happy. It makes you more critical of the people around you. You start personifying the drivers of the cars around you, even though you're not aware of who they are as people at all, unless they demonstrate who they are as people, which sometimes happens. But mostly it's just you become very presumptuous and irritated in that kind of a traffic environment. Anyway, I remembered one more thing that I wanted to connect all of this to, which is sometimes you go through the day and you aren't having any, sometimes you go through weeks or months and you can feel so dull or numb to the world. And yet then a day comes along where you have an interaction that is either so emotional or so out of the ordinary or this sort of thing that might only be able to happen every so often. For example, say you live somewhere for 4 years and then you move. That can only happen every 4 years at most. So there are some things that are unique. Some days we have are unique and they can strike us in a different way. They can sort of snap us back into reality for a minute. And I had a really nice experience like that recently where I have a friend who I haven't seen in a long time, and she's moving out of the country. And luckily, by total chance, I was able to see her the day before she moved out of this area. And so it just was one of those things that was so intensely emotional, because whenever you say goodbye to anyone, you don't know if you're going to see them again. But it's rare for me to say goodbye to anyone who is actually really potentially never coming back to this place, potentially never coming back to this area that I live in, this neck of the woods at all. And so I was just having an ordinary day where I was kind of in my dissociated task paralysis zone that I can often get stuck in. And then by chance, I wound up seeing my friend and having such a meaningful interaction with them. And so, I don't know, those moments are so vital. Those are moments where life feels extremely full to me, where I feel actually really connected to another person in a deep and spiritual and transcendent way, where it's okay, well, we've had this effect on each other in our lives, and now maybe I'll never see you again, but I'm never going to forget you. So anyway, that's just another thing that is on my mind with that fullness of life thing. Ultimately, every day can be like that because we are in a because we're in here, we're in our personhood, we are people, and we are experiencing unique days every day. But the norms of society would have us just throw that away and consume and be entertained and be distracted until the day that we die. And even our death is so hidden away from us. It's something shameful, as this author reflects on coming to England for the first time and being so perplexed by how it seemed like death was something almost to be ashamed of if someone died around you. That's how little it was talked about, or how little gravity was given to it as far as how you're going to live your life before your death. So that's something I was thinking about after I had that interaction. And then I had another really weird coincidental interaction basically too soon after that. I felt like I was still processing the first one and wanted to write about it. And then there was this whole other one that followed. Also a positive interaction, less positive, more neutral, but it was still weird. Anyway, that's something that I try to bring with me all the time in my life, but I do find it beaten out of me by society, pulled out of me, distracted away from me in society. And so that is what this passage is about. So this is by Anthony Bloom. It's called Beginning to Pray, and I just found it at a thrift store when I was looking for books to resell. And so he's an archbishop, I think, of the Eastern Orthodox Church. And so it starts with an interview between him and some other guy, I think Timothy Winston. I don't know who that is. And so I will have a sip of water and then I will read this. So, all right. The interviewer says, I remember you saying, I am mad, but it is an odd kind of madness because other people want to catch it. What did you mean by that? And Archbishop Anthony Bloom says, as Christians, we are always in tension, in anguish, and at the same time in bliss. This is mad, ridiculous, but it is true, accepting the dark night just as we accept the brilliance of the day. We have to make an act of surrender. If I am in Christ, there are moments when I must share the cry of the Lord on the cross and the anguish in the Garden of Gethsemane. There is a way of being defeated, even in our faith, and this is a way of sharing the anguish of the Lord. I don't believe that we should ever say, this cannot happen to you. If we are Christians, we should go through this life accepting the life and the world, not trying to create a falsified world. But on the other hand, the Christian is like someone who lives in 3 dimensions in a world in which the majority of people live in 2. People who live freely and within a dimension of eternity will always find that something is wrong. They will always find themselves being the odd man out. The same problem was faced by the early Christians when they said that their only king was God. People turned round to them and said, if you say that you are disloyal to our king, and often persecuted them. But the only true way of being loyal to this 2-dimensional world is to be loyal to the 3-dimensional world, because in reality, the world is 3-dimensional. And I'll say that again because it might not come across in voice so directly. I had to reread the sentence. He's saying, if you do want to be true to this world, this created world that we live in, this material, all these things around us, the things that are real, we're not denying that all of the stresses of society come from somewhere. We're not saying to transcend it internally or enter into a Zen state. We live in the world. And he's saying, but you need this eternal element in order to actually be true to that world. You need to understand your values and your innermost existence in order to be true to it. The only way of being loyal to this 2-dimensional world is to be loyal to the 3-dimensional world, because in reality, the world is 3-dimensional. If you really live in 3 dimensions and do not simply live in 2 and imagine the 3rd, then life will be full and meaningful. The early Christians were able to do it, and Christians today are also able to do that. I didn't get this out of it the first time, but what I was just describing with my friend who I was saying goodbye to, he says it is... it's accepting the dark night just as we accept the brilliance of the day. That is what it felt. It felt like as Christians, we are always in tension. It was a very tense moment in a certain way. It was in anguish and at the same time in bliss. So, yeah, ultimately, I just wanted to share that here because the show is about trying to get everybody to live in 3 dimensions and take it really seriously. Like, I'm not imagining the 3rd dimension. And sometimes you can, for a long time, live like that, where you might understand you might have this relationship to religion or existence where you understand it on the theoretical level, but you don't live it. You are interested in it intellectually or theoretically, but you don't make it real. And as long as you live at that intellectual level, you are not fully within life. And so the other thing I was going to read is just this verse from John chapter 7, starting at verse 37. On the last and greatest day of the feast, Jesus stood up and exclaimed, "Let anyone who thirsts come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as Scripture says, rivers of living water will flow from within him." Rivers of living water will flow from within him. And there's, as with most things in the Bible, you can really zoom in on it and break apart the words and find more and more within the words. But just immediately, it is in this context, Jesus is God. God is the actual substance creating everything. It's that which has created this world. And Jesus is also the Word. In the Genesis myth, there's a understanding of how God created the world through speaking, through breath. It is a symbol of the creation of this world for people. And so, let anyone who thirsts come to me and drink. You can come to this book and drink at the book, or you can also come to God and drink from God. There are so many ways to get out of the things that are torturing you in this world or desensitizing you in this world. You can find so many ways in to God. And when you do really enter in, and it's not theoretical, that is where rivers of living water start to flow within you and then can flow out of you into the world around you, into everything you do in the world, every move you make in the world. And so, yeah, that's what I wanted to say. And I'll hop off in a sec. In other news, my friend, she printed me a copy of the Pope's Encyclical. Well, she printed it for herself to read it, and now she is done reading it, so I will read it. It is something like 42 pages when you take away the sources, but she affirmed, as other people have been saying to me, that it really reminds them of my project with this show, because at the core of this show is the vital importance of human dignity and preserving human dignity in the 21st century. And that means not just in the personal sense, but preserving it. We need political circumstances that are going to preserve the human person as the 21st century presses on. And we are in such an essential decade, such an essential cluster of decades for determining what the whole rest of humanity might look like. And so I look forward to reading it. I hope lots of people are reading it. You should read it as well and let me know what you think of it. And yeah. All right. Thanks for watching. If you watched this far, please like the video, subscribe, share it with your friends. And I look forward to the next one. Should be on here, I don't know, tomorrow. There's a bunch of shit to talk about. So pardon my language. But all right. Have a good night, everybody. And goodbye.